G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be having a look at the king of 10.7. This is the MiG-21 Bis, and it is king because of its performance. The MiG-21 Bis is probably the best performing jet that we have ever seen come to the game, and comes packed with a fair amount of features, which are really nice. Of course, you can't quite get yourself a MiG-21 Bis in real life unless you have a lot of money, but if you do have a little bit of money to spare, you can always buy a MiG-21 model in the description below with that Air Models link. I would very much appreciate it if you helped support the channel. Anyway, the MiG-21 Bis currently comes with R60s, R3Rs, R13Ms, which you should never ever use, and R3Ss, which you should only use when you're stock and crying in a little corner. So, what is it that makes this plane so special? Well, it's got a lot of performance, and that's basically it. The MiG-21 Bis is not particularly easy to fly. It is not particularly easy to master, but when you do master this plane, it has a couple of little things that push it over the edge over the Phantoms, which I kind of find a little bit annoying. Now, this is annoying not because I hate the MiG-21 Bis. In fact, I'm personally slightly biased towards MiGs, just out of personal preference. But the Phantom at the moment currently doesn't really stand a chance out of its performance. Now, what Gaijin have done is they've basically taken its, or the balance of top tier. They've had a look at the weaponry and they've had a look at the performance. Now, the way you balance a top tier jet, in my opinion, would be to balance out the performance first and then have the ordnance all equal at that tier. Now, with the Phantom, that kind of throws it out because it carries a maximum of 8 missiles. But you could do something like reducing the capable missiles, or the number of capable missiles that it could carry in total. For example, only giving it AIM-7Ds at as well as the AIM-9Js, or giving it E's with both AIM-7s and AIM-9s together in a combo. You would limit their ordnance options that way in order to balance things out. Now, what Gaijin have done instead is they've allowed the Phantom to keep these sort of high-level missiles, and then they've realized that because the Phantoms are quite strong, and then they have the MiG-21 SMT and the MF as the response, the MiG-21 MF and the SMT didn't really stand up to the F4E and the F4EJ as well as they probably could have. Now, the solution to this would have been to give the SMT and the MF flare pods, which I don't know if they carry them in real life, but that would have been really nice to have. Just a sort of thing, because the flares are a little bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card in this case, and that would have been really nice to see. Now, unfortunately, they didn't do that, and instead they gave the Soviets a better performing jet, which means that instead of the weaponry being the issue here, it is now the performance. Now, it doesn't really matter how good your weaponry is. If you can't get it on target, the plane isn't good. And in the case of the F4E, it's not that the plane isn't good, but it's that the plane needs to be played in a very specific way in order to make the maximum utility out of it. And unfortunately, that is not entirely possible in certain circumstances because the MiG-21 Bis is really quick. In fact, it basically beats out the Phantom at most areas, which is kind of crap because the F4E kind of needs a little area to dominate. Now, if you think back to 1.85, you had an area of domination for both the F100, the MiG-19 PT, and of course the subsonics that it fought. The MiG-19 PT was better at low speed turning and mid speed turning, so for example between 800 and 600 and below 400, whereas the F100 was better at those high turns because it bled a lot of speed, and then it was better between that 800 and 600 km per hour range. For me, that was where the golden balance sort of stayed for that tier, and for me that was really what made that top tier combat really good. On top of that, we're going to consider the patch where the Mirage and the J35D were sort of added, and it was a really good patch. It was about June last year, or this year rather. My god, this year's gone by quickly. Regardless, this particular patch was a really positive patch because everyone had something competitive and everyone had some sort of weapon system around the same potency. Now, in this case here with the BVR patch, they have thrown that balance out because the Phantom was the dominant sort of figure, if you will. And now that balance has gone back towards the MiGs because they've added a sort of system that has more engine power, that has more thrust, that has more dogfighting capability as such, more maneuvering, more positional capability as such. And this throws out the balance. So what Gaijin should have ideally done, like I said, is just made some changes to either the weapons loadout or the ability for the SMT and the MF to carry flares, which unfortunately isn't the case, and now, as a result, we basically have to power creep our way up. Now, Gaijin recently did sort of add the R60s, or give the R60s a little bit more efficacy, which is kind of, I don't want to say annoying, but I don't think it was the correct decision. I think having the R60s at the level that they were, not the AIM 9E version, or the basically performing like a glorified AIM 9E, but a little bit after, was sort of in the right spot. You see, a couple of enemies were sort of working their way around just a little bit, and it was doing sort of okay. Now, of course, like, it's not all the MiG-21 Bis's fault for being a good plane, and of course it's not entirely the Phantom's fault, but the Phantoms are now, I've noticed personally, turn fighting a lot more than they are, or than they used to. They're not playing their altitude, they're not playing their speed, and of course they're not using their advantages, which is their highly sophisticated avionics and their BVR missiles. This has resulted in the MiG-21 Bis having an astoundingly high win rate. And there are a couple of reasons for this. One, the excellent performance of the MiG-21 Bis. Two, the forgiving acceleration and straight line performance of the MiG-21 Bis. And third of all, the buffing of the R60s. The R60s were recently buffed, and now it seems to be just MiG territory. I really don't like when this happens. Personally, I just want to see everyone have the correct, or like a decent level of performance for each of their vehicles. This was achieved around June, July last year, and I don't see why Gaijin had to change it in that way. For me, it was kind of sad, because I really liked it the way it was. Now, the MiG-21 Bis is definitely an excellent plane, but it doesn't come without its faults. Now, the MiG-21 as a platform does not have good energy retention in a turn, and that is kind of where the MiG-21 falls short. Now, how can you use this as a Phantom? Well, here's the thing. You need to be playing in 2v2s. If you're playing in 2v2s, that's where the fun is going to be. That's where the strength, if you will, is going to be as a Phantom. It's going to be in those 2v2s, much like the F-100 was back in the day of early supersonics. It is now very, very important, in fact, more important than ever, to work with your teammates as a Phantom. You can't turn fight. You need your altitude, and of course you have your RWR, and of course you have that climb rate as a Phantom to deal with your opponents. Now, one thing that I have noticed that could be causing a little bit of anxiety, I suppose, between Phantom pilots, is the fact that the FGR2 is not alongside the other Phantoms. I think the FGR2 and the FG1 should be put with the Japanese and the American teams. I don't really see a good reason for this to be the case. The Phantoms, they're Phantoms. They should all be sort of roughly in the realm together. Phantom versus MiG is the ideal sort of combat situation, and Mirage and J35D and F104S can sort of be slotted in the interim. And I find that okay. But I think the issue with Phantoms not climbing could also stem from them just not wanting to climb because of the FGR2. The FGR2 does have AIM 7Es. It's just as potent, and it is just as deadly as the AIM 7Es on the FGR2. Sorry, on the F4EJ and the F4E. So this could be, I guess, a potential reason that could potentially stop people from wanting to climb. But one of the things that you do need to do in a Phantom is climb, and I don't see it. I just don't see Phantom players climbing. Now, of course, the MiG-21 Bis is a little bit too strong, and I would say that the Phantom is still capable, but the MiG-21 Bis is the meta jet. I look at the background footage here. I think this is the classic example. You're seeing a lot of Phantoms wasting their energy, and you're seeing a lot of F-104s and allied jets in general just not paying attention. I managed to snag 2 very easy kills here. This is the kind of situation that I'm talking about, and now the Axis has an absolute advantage. there is just a massive numbers advantage. The enemy team is fallen apart and there is simply nothing they can do. And that's because there is a poor sort of early execution of their maneuvers. Obviously, top tier does require a little bit of skill. I think that goes without saying. But the idea that it doesn't sort of is alien to me, because you still do need to position yourself correctly. And this is what climbing in props kind of does. That's why I find a lot of people that say climbing in props isn't important to be flat out wrong, because, you know, they are. Positioning your plane in the correct spot to perform a correct attack is vital. If you don't do that, you're going to set yourself up for failure, and that's kind of what's happening here. The Phantoms are, in general, setting themselves up for failure. But it's not, obviously, entirely the Phantom's fault. The MiG-21 Bis is still very, very powerful. So how would I propose to fix this? I honestly have no idea. I guess if there's a Phantom that has more thrust, then perhaps that is the way to go. Perhaps something like an F4E with a bit more thrust would be ideal. But apart from that, I don't really have any other solutions. Maybe some very early version of, I guess, an F111 or an F14, since that's the next logical step. But maybe, just maybe, we could have an F5E that could stand up to that. That might be a good solution there. Apart from that, I don't really know. I am kind of lost on this one. I like to give you guys a solution. I like to talk about issues when I present something that can potentially be put into the game to adjust the current situation, like what we have here. But honestly, I'm a little bit lost. I don't really know my high tier or my Cold War jets that well, and any information from you guys would be much appreciated. So do let me know in the comment section below. But for now, I think it's just a matter of trying to play your Phantoms as smart as possible, not losing your speed, not sort of staying at low altitude, and of course using your flares and maneuvering and turning your afterburner off when it was appropriate. Look at the background footage here that I'm showing you. I'm basically catching a bunch of people off guard. It might be the spotting system. It could very well be the spotting system. It could be the fact that the MiGs aren't climbing, and so it's therefore not really worth climbing, but you still need that altitude advantage. A low altitude jet is a dead jet at top tier. Anything with afterburners will absolutely rocket up to altitude, and you will basically never ever catch it. So you have to be super careful. Even though you have those missiles that have such good range, it doesn't really matter, because that altitude will keep you, especially when planes are traveling at speed, from basically touching them. Because if you have to go up to altitude, you basically sacrifice all of your speed. And that's where the important skill factor, that positioning, comes in with top tier. You need to really factor that in, and it is really, really important, and a lot of people tend to forget it. Have a look at every single kill I get here. It is probably below 4,000 meters, and I would say some of these later ones are below 1,000 meters in some cases. These particular matches end very quickly because teams don't utilize the altitude advantage enough. And the times where I find myself losing in the MiG-21 Bis and dying is when all of the Phantoms are above all of the MiGs. So if you can get yourself an altitude advantage, maybe you can stem the tide. But you're not going to fix it entirely. And that's where I'm asking the community for a couple of solutions. Obviously, I'm not magic. I don't have all the fixes. I wish I did, but that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So if you guys could provide or suggest a solution, I would really appreciate it. For now, you know what I said, but try and keep climbing. That's going to be your biggest sort of bonus. The thing that is going to keep you alive in a Phantom. Work with your team. Your team is really important. I know most of them can be brain dead. Most of them don't even talk in chat. And most of them are probably just farming AI or ground targets. But you still need to at least attempt to work with them. Because if you don't, then you'll never know if you come across a good teammate. There are so many times where I've done that, and I've found a good teammate, and sometimes I've made a friend along the way. So keep that in mind. It's very important. Work with your team. If you have to, fly in a squad. If you have to, fly with an F1 or an F104 or something like that to serve as a little bit of backup. But apart from that, ladies and gents, that's all the advice I can really give. If you have a solution, again, let me know in the comments section below. And as for everything else, I hope you had a Merry Christmas, because this video will probably be going up on the 26th of December. So I hope you guys are having an excellent Christmas. I hope you guys are sort of keeping warm if you're in the Northern Hemisphere and keeping cool if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.